Welcome back to the deep dive. Now, if you thought the fight for Texas independence sort of peaked with the Alamo or Goliad, well, you'd be mistaken.
Yeah, profoundly mistaken, actually.
We are diving headfirst into what might be the absolute darkest, most terrifying chapter of the whole Texas Revolution.
It really is. This is the point where the war stopped being about, high ideals and independence, at least for the average person.
It became what?
It became a desperate, panicked scramble for sheer survival. The specter of total annihilation was suddenly very, very real.
So let's set the scene. The news hitting the settlements is just horrific.
Unimaginably bad. First, the Alamo's gone, all defenders killed, executed. Then, almost right after, word comes about Fannon's command at Goliad.
The Goliad massacre.
Exactly. Hundreds of men slaughtered after surrendering. It was calculated brutality, meant to terrify everyone into submission.
And Santa Anna isn't sitting still.
No, he's advancing. Fast.
Yeah.
With a large professional army. And crucially, there's basically nothing organized standing between his forces and the civilian settlements.
The war wasn't on some distant battlefield anymore.
It was on their doorstep, literally. Threatening, extermination. The fear was palpable.
Okay, so this sounds like just absolute chaos. A mix of terror, maybe some rage, but mostly vulnerability. Texas was on the brink of total collapse here.
That's a perfect way to put it. It was hanging by a thread.
All right, let's try to unpack this. For this deep dive, we're really looking at two journeys happening at the same time, right? Two desperate, almost contradictory movements across Texas in March and April of 36.
Precisely. You've got these two narratives unfolding side by side. The first one, that's the runaway scrape.
The civilians fleeing.
Yes, the mass flight of the civilian population. Men, women, children, everyone. They heard about the massacres, knew Santa Anna's reputation, and just ran eastward, believing any delay meant death.
Packing whatever they could grab, I imagine.
If that. Just sheer panic.
Okay, and the second journey?
That's the story of General Sam Houston. He's deliberate, calculated, and deeply unpopular strategic retreat.
The unpopular part is key here.
Oh, absolutely. He was trading land, precious Texian land, for time. Time he desperately needed. It was a huge gamble that, well, it saved the revolution in the end, but it nearly cost him his command, his reputation, everything. His own men were furious.
Two journeys. Panic and strategy. Let's start with the human cost. The runaway scrape. When that news hit the settlements, it wasn't just a call to arms, was it?
No, for many, it was the signal to run. Immediately. The danger felt extreme, immediate. And remember, Santa Anna's reputation for brutality wasn't new. They remembered earlier instances, like the Battle of Medina years before. The Goliad massacre just confirmed their worst fears.
And life on the frontier was already tough, right? These weren't people living in safe, established towns necessarily.
Yeah, exactly. The sources really emphasized this. Frontier life meant constant insecurity. They were already dealing with threats, Indian raids, theft, violence.
From tribes like the Comanches.
Comanches, Wacos, others. It often took armed groups just for basic protection, like getting supplies or traveling. So they were already living on edge.
So when this huge, organized Mexican army shows up, led by someone known for ruthlessness, that existing fear just explodes.
Into outright panic.
Yeah.
This wasn't a trickle. It was a flood. A mass exodus. It started the moment Houston began his retreat from Gonzales. Families joined the stream of people heading east, abandoning homes, farms, everything.
And the conditions.
Yeah.
It wasn't easy travel.
Far from it. Think about the timing. It's spring in Texas. That means rain. Heavy rain.
Mud.
Lots of mud. The few roads turned into swamps.
Yeah.
Wagons, carts, they just got swallowed up.
Yeah.
People were struggling with the absolute basics. Not enough food, sickness spreading because of the exposure and wet conditions.
And just the physical effort, trying to move kids, maybe some livestock through that mess.
It's grueling to even imagine. And all the while, they're terrified. Terrified of the Mexican army catching up, but also
the Indian tribes.
Still a threat. These tribes were active, opportunistic, a column of fleeing settlers, disorganized, vulnerable. That's a target. So they had enemies potentially coming from multiple directions.
The emotional toll. Abandoning your home, everything you've built. Maybe not for the first time for some, based on what you said about earlier dangers.
Right. Some families mentioned in the sources had already moved before because of Indian threats.
Oh.
Now they're doing it again, but this time with the feeling that the entire military defense had just collapsed. Bexar, Goliad. The news was catastrophic.
And when Houston retreated from Gonzales, he burned it.
He did. On the night of March 13th, just days after leaving the convention where he'd been made commander-in-chief, he ordered Gonzales burned.
Why?
Deny resources to Santa Anna, storehouses, shelter, anything the Mexican army could use. But imagine seeing your own town go up in flames, ordered by your own general. It must have cemented that feeling of being utterly alone, completely defenseless.
Yeah, that paints a stark picture, this runaway scrape. It's more than just people fleeing. It represents something fundamental.
It really does. It's the physical proof of the settlers' complete loss of faith in the military, or maybe even the government, to protect them. They weren't running because they were cowards. They were running because they'd seen what happened at Goliad. Surrender wasn't an option Santa Anna seemed to offer.
So running east was the only defense they felt they had. Speed and distance.
Their only hope. And, this massive civilian flight put incredible pressure on Houston.
Oh, so?
Well, morally, he had to consider these thousands of vulnerable people following his army's retreat, but politically, every mile he moved east, away from the fight, he looked weaker, more cowardly to his critics, and even his own men who were desperate for revenge.
Which brings us perfectly to that second journey, Houston's retreat. Let's talk about him taking command. He's elected commander-in-chief by the convention on March 4th, 1836.
Unanimously elected, yeah. He leaves the convention around March 7th and almost instantly gets the news about the Alamo disaster.
So what's his first move?
Pragmatism. Pure military logic. He immediately sends out orders, tells the remaining forces, especially Fannin, down near Goliad, to fall back, consolidate, gather supplies, gather men. He knew scattered units were sitting ducks.
He realized they couldn't hold fixed positions.
Exactly. He'd actually been trying, as the sources mentioned, to get ready to march to the relief of Bexar earlier, but couldn't because of the difficulty of getting horses and provisions. The logistics were a nightmare from the get-go.
And the army he inherits. What state is it in? Not exactly a professional force.
Oh, far from it. The sources are blunt. They call them raw, angry, and undisciplined volunteers.
Angry makes sense after the Alamo and Goliad.
Definitely angry, but also untrained. Morale was rock bottom after the defeats, and conditions were terrible, suffering for lack of clothing, food, basic supplies. It was dire.
So he's essentially leading a poorly equipped, heartbroken mob that wants revenge now.
That's a good way to put it. A mob, not an army. They had courage, sure, plenty of righteous anger, but they lack the crucial discipline needed for a coordinated battle against Santa Anna's regulars, especially his cavalry.
So if he'd turned and fought right away?
It would likely have been another Goliad, maybe worse. A final, definitive defeat. Houston understood that. An undisciplined force, running purely on emotion. They'd be shattered in an open fight.
But ordering a retreat eastward towards Burnham's on the Colorado River, away from the enemy, that must have gone down badly.
Like lead. The men wanted to fight. They wanted revenge for the Alamo, for Goliad.
Yeah.
Retreat it felt like cowardice. Plain and simple.
And this wasn't just grumbling in the ranks, was it? He faced serious opposition from higher up, too.
Oh, absolutely. The political situation was, frankly, a disaster. The provisional government was tearing itself apart. You had this intense conflict between Governor Henry Smith and the Legislative Council. The sources talk about faction and intrigue. The council was overstepping its bounds, trying to run military matters, even encouraging what the sources call suicidal expeditions.
Like the Matamoros expedition idea.
Exactly, that whole fiasco.
Yeah.
And worse, there were deliberate efforts, machinations, aimed specifically at undermining Houston, destroying his influence.
So he's got Santa Anna advancing in front of him and a political firestorm behind him.
Pretty much. He's fighting a war on two fronts, in a way. His critics weren't subtle. They included military malcontents and political rivals. They openly called him a coward, a disorganizer. They didn't trust his strategy. They wanted a quick, glorious fight. Consequences be damned.
This internal conflict, the council's actions, it's described as anarchy and disorganizing course in the sources. That level of chaos must have made it incredibly hard to get anything done, supplies, recruitment, anything.
It paralyzed things, made Houston's job almost impossible.
So how did he even hold on to his command? If the government itself was actively working against him, or parts of it were.
It's a testament to his resilience and maybe the legitimacy he still held for some. He was Governor Smith's appointee. Key figures in the field like Neal, Travis, Bowie before their deaths recognized his authority. The idea of a unified command under Houston persisted, even as the council tried to appoint its own agents and create confusion.
So he just endured it.
He endured it. He knew he commanded the only real army Texas had left. He put the survival of that army, and thus the revolution, above his own popularity, above the political noise. He was willing to sacrifice his reputation to buy the time Texas needed.
Okay, let's dive into that strategy. Hindsight makes it look brilliant, but like you said, at the time, he's being called a coward. What exactly was the genius behind this seemingly cowardly retreat? What was the calculation?
It was calculated, absolutely. You can really break it down into maybe three main pillars, a kind of Fabian strategy adapted for Texas.
Okay, pillar number one.
Time for training. It sounds basic, but it was critical. He had raw, angry men, yes, but they weren't soldiers. Not yet.
So the retreat was also a moving training camp.
In a way, yeah. He needed time to drill them. Not parade ground drills necessarily, but basic discipline. Learning to follow orders under pressure, move as a unit, load and fire with some coordination, turn that mob into something resembling an actual fighting force.
Because undisciplined troops against professionals.
They get routed.
Yeah.
Instantly. Especially by cavalry. Every day they retreated was another day for drill, another day to integrate the few reinforcements trickling in. He was forging an army while on the run.
Okay, that makes sense. Pillar number two, logistics.
Yes, logistical attrition. This is subtle, but maybe the most strategically clever part. Think about it. The deeper Santa Anna marched into Texas.
The longer his supply lines got.
Exactly. And the Mexican army already had supply problems before they started this massive push. Sources mention issues with pay, provisions, chronic problems.
And Houston is just stretching those lines thinner and thinner.
Making them more vulnerable with every mile. Plus, remember the weather.
The spring rains, the mud.
Devastating for logistics. Santa Anna relied on mule trains, wagons. They bogged down. Supplies couldn't keep up with the front lines. Houston was deliberately drawing the Mexican army into sparsely populated areas, making it harder for them to live off the land, further straining their already weak logistics.
So he's weaponizing the landscape and the distance.
He is. He knew a hungry, poorly supplied army gets tired, gets demoralized, makes mistakes. He was counting on it.
Brilliant. Okay, third pillar. Choosing the battlefield. He wasn't just running away from Santa Anna, he was running towards something specific.
Absolutely. He wasn't retreating aimlessly. He was playing chess with the Texas terrain. He knew Santa Anna's biggest strengths were numbers and, critically, his cavalry. Trained, effective cavalry.
Which the Texians mostly lacked.
Right. So Houston needed to find ground where that cavalry advantage was neutralized. He was deliberately leading Santa Anna towards the coastal plains, towards areas with rivers, bayous, woods, marshy ground.
Why there specifically?
Because that kind of terrain breaks up cavalry charges. Horses can't maneuver effectively in swamps or thick woods. It forces the fight to become more of an infantry engagement.
Which plays to the Texians' strengths.
Exactly. Many Texians were skilled riflemen, used to fighting from cover. By choosing terrain that hindered cavalry and favored defensive positions for riflemen, Houston was essentially setting the terms of the eventual battle. He was taking away Santa Anna's best weapon.
Trading space for a tactical advantage.
A decisive one, he hoped.
And there's a political angle, too, isn't there? Just keeping the army alive while the government was in chaos.
That's the crucial underpinning. With the provisional government basically imploding due to infighting and, as the sources put it, low intrigue and personal aggrandizement, the army was the only stable instrument of the revolution left.
So if the army was defeated,
everything collapses, militarily and politically. By keeping the army intact, even in retreat, Houston preserved the revolution itself. He ensured there would be something left to fight with and potentially govern with when the time was right. It required incredible strategic patience.
Patience that must have worn incredibly thin. Morale had to be terrible. His own men calling him a coward. They needed some sign of hope, right? Something tangible.
Desperately. You can't retreat forever, psychologically. The real glimmer of hope wasn't one single dramatic event, but rather the slow, steady success of Houston's underlying plan. Consolidation and organization.
The logistics again.
The boring but essential stuff. His constant orders to commanders to gather troops, find supplies. Slowly, painstakingly, it started to work. Despite the political chaos, men and supplies were starting to converge.
Even getting basic supplies must have felt like a victory.
Absolutely. Houston himself, early on, was struggling just to get horses and food to move his small force. So when reinforcements did arrive, the sources mentioned, regulars and volunteers are also on the march to headquarters. It was huge.
It showed the retreat wasn't just dissolving into nothing.
Right. It showed they were building, not just running. And any improvement in their capability was a massive morale boost. Think about artillery.
Cannons, even smaller.
Immensely valuable.
Yep.
We know from the sources how prized even small cannons were on the frontier. Like the 4-pounder given to DeWitt's colony for defense against Indians, it represented serious firepower.
So finding or keeping any artillery operational during this retreat, That would feel significant.
Hugely significant. It meant they weren't just men with rifles facing down trained infantry and cavalry. They had something that could potentially stop a charge, break a formation. It symbolized offensive potential, resilience.
So the hope came from seeing the army actually grow, get better organized, and acquire some level of real fighting power under a commander who, despite everything, was still recognized as the legitimate leader.
It's exactly. Houston's persistence in maintaining that legitimate command structure, backed by Governor Smith, against all the council's meddling, provided stability. The combination of growing numbers, improved, even if minimally, equipment like artillery, and stable leadership. That's what turned them from refugees with guns back into an army. Maybe a small, battered army, but an army with a plan.
It wasn't about a single flashy moment then. It was the hard, thankless grind of organization paying off.
That's the real story of this period, I think. Houston's sheer tenacity held it all together. He resisted the urge for that glorious, probably suicidal, immediate battle and stuck to his methodical plan. By the time he finally decided to stop retreating, the force he commanded was fundamentally different from the mob that had fled Gonzales. They were ready.
Okay, so let's bring it all together. Houston's gambit trading land for time seems to have worked. He got the time to train his men, however minimally.
Yeah,
He stretched Santa Anna's logistics to the absolute limit.
definitely check. The Mexican army was struggling.
And he's led them to ground that favors his forces, negates the cavalry.
Check. He's chosen his spot.
And right at this moment, Santa Anna makes a mistake. A big one.
A fatal one. Driven by arrogance, really. Success at the Alamo at Goliad.
Yeah.
He's overconfident. The sources note he was marching rapidly with a large force against Texas, believing the Texians were basically beaten, just scattered fugitives.
And this leads him to do what?
Divide his forces. The cardinal sin of military strategy, especially when you're deep in enemy territory with stretched supply lines.
Why did he split them?
He got word. The Texian government officials were fleeing eastward, trying to escape by sea perhaps. He became obsessed with capturing them, ending the rebellion personally and decisively. So he takes a smaller, faster vanguard force and races ahead.
Leaving the bulk of his army behind.
Straggling behind, yes. He completely underestimated Houston's discipline and the trap being laid. He thought he was chasing rabbits. Houston had lured the main force deep, deep into Texas, and now Santa Anna had conveniently isolated himself, the head of the snake, right where Houston wanted him.
The fox had led the hunter right into the snare.
Perfectly put.
And then, Houston stops. The man called a coward, the general who only retreated. He finally halts the army.
The long retreat is over. His army is as ready as it's going to be. They're positioned. The enemy's divided and complacent. The gamble is about to pay off.
He bet everything on his strategy, on his men's newfound discipline, and on Santa Anna's arrogance.
And the moment for the decisive clash had finally arrived.
After a month of relentless retreating, Sam Houston's army finally stopped. They made their camp in a grove of oak trees on a marshy plain bordered by Buffalo Bayou. Nearby, an overconfident Santa Anna set up his own camp, unaware that the trap was about to be sprung. The two armies were now in position for the final bloody showdown of the Revolution. Next time, victory in 18 minutes, the Battle of San Jacinto.